Unlock your body's recovery code, the Biohacker's workout strategy. She stood in the mirror, tracing the bruise on her shoulder. Same routine, same exhaustion, but this time, something whispered back. Like most of us, she wanted to feel strong again. Not perfect, just present. But every workout seemed to push her further from the version of herself she still remembered. Her trainer had said rest was part of the plan. But rest felt like failure. It felt like losing ground while everyone else kept moving forward. What she didn't know yet was that her body had been speaking a language she'd never learned to hear. For years, scientists studying elite athletes noticed something strange. The ones who improved fastest weren't always the ones who trained hardest. They were the ones who listened differently. She thought about the mornings she'd forced herself out of bed, legs heavy, heart racing before she even started. Pride kept her going. But pride doesn't negotiate with biology. One evening, scrolling through recovery forums, she found a post that stopped her. Someone described feeling exactly what she felt, that invisible wall between effort and progress. The comments were full of stories, people who'd pushed through pain until their bodies shut down, others who'd discovered something that changed everything. Part of her still doubted it could work. She started small. Instead of ignoring soreness, she began tracking it. Not obsessively, just honestly. Which muscles ached, how long it lasted, what made it better. Researchers at Stanford found something similar when studying recovery patterns. When routine meets awareness, consistency finally sticks. Not because motivation returns, but because the body stops fighting itself. She laughed one morning, realizing progress didn't always look like progress. Some days rest was the hardest workout, choosing to stop when everything in her wanted to prove she could keep going. That took a different kind of strength. But what happened next changed everything. She noticed her lifts improving on days she actually slept well. Not slightly better, noticeably stronger. Her endurance climbed when she stopped treating every session like a test. The science behind it was clearer than she expected. Muscle doesn't grow during workouts, it grows after. In the quiet hours between effort, when protein synthesis peaks and inflammation calms. Recovery isn't passive, it's the most active part of training. She thought she was done chasing numbers, until that moment when her body finally cooperated, instead of resisted. Her journal entries shifted, less about reps and weight, more about how she felt walking upstairs, whether her mood stayed stable, if sleep came easier. Then came the injury, a pulled hamstring during sprints, the real test of everything she'd learned. Old her would have panicked, pushed through, proven she wasn't weak. New her paused, felt where the pain lived, asked what it needed. Sometimes we only understand strength when it's tested. She researched active recovery protocols used by physical therapists. Light movement to increase blood flow without stress, nutrition timing to support tissue repair, sleep hygiene that actually matched circadian biology. There was still one thing she couldn't explain, though. Why some weeks felt effortless while others dragged, even when she did everything right. A sports physiologist she followed mentioned something called recovery debt. The accumulated stress from workouts, life pressure, poor sleep, emotional strain, all competing for the same biological resources. Your body doesn't separate gym stress from work stress from relationship stress. It processes everything through the same systems, same hormones, same immune responses. When she mapped her hardest training weeks against her life calendar, the pattern was obvious. Every crash happened when multiple stress sources peaked together. What would you do in that moment? Keep pushing or redesign the approach? She chose redesign. Instead of fixed workout schedules, she built flexible frameworks. Hard days when energy was high, gentle days when life demanded more elsewhere, rest days without guilt. Biohackers in Silicon Valley had been experimenting with this for years. Heart rate variability tracking to measure nervous system recovery, wearable sensors to catch overtraining before it became injury. She wasn't interested in quantifying everything, but she started paying attention to resting heart rate. If it jumped 5 beats higher than baseline, she knew her body was already working hard on something invisible. Part of her still wanted the old certainty. the rigid plan that removed decision fatigue. But rigidity had broken her before. Somewhere between the failures and the quiet mornings, she found rhythm. Not perfection, not even consistency, just rhythm. Her definition of progress shifted. Strength wasn't just weight on the bar. It was training through a stressful week without injury, sleeping 7 hours instead of 5, choosing the workout her body needed over the one her ego wanted. Researchers studying longevity athletes, people who stay active into their 80s and 90s, found one common thread. They all learned to modulate intensity across decades, not just weeks. She laughed at how simple it sounded, and how impossibly hard it felt to actually practice. What surprised her most wasn't just how changing her recovery approach improved her training, it was how everything else started to feel different once she stopped fighting her biology. Work stress didn't pile up the same way. Sleep came easier, mood stayed more stable, energy felt renewable instead of something to hoard and ration. She wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, it took months before she figured out what really worked for her body specifically. Then she found something that accelerated everything. A protocol combining targeted nutrition timing with specific recovery supplements, magnesium threonate for deep sleep, adaptogens for stress modulation, and amino acids timed around training. This isn't a promotion, just sharing what made a noticeable difference when nothing else had moved the needle. I'll leave the link below if you want to explore what I mean. The biggest shift wasn't physical, though. It was psychological. She stopped viewing her body as something to dominate and started treating it as something to collaborate with. A partner in the process, not an obstacle to overcome. Setback became feedback. Pain became information. Fatigue became a signal, not a character flaw. Some mornings she still wanted to prove something. Push harder, go longer, show up, despite the whispers that she needed rest. But now she could hear those whispers differently. Not as weakness, but as wisdom. Researchers studying intuitive exercise, the ability to match effort to capacity without external metrics, found that it takes about 6 months to develop. 6 months of listening before the signal gets clear. She was 8 months in now, and the signal was getting louder. Her training looked different than it used to. Some weeks were intense, others were gentle, some days were just walking, others were heavy lifting that left her euphoric. There was no perfect formula, just continuous adjustment based on honest feedback. What part of this resonates with where you are right now? The most unexpected benefit came from her relationships. When she stopped running on empty, she had more patience, more presence, more capacity for the people she cared about. Her partner noticed it first. "You seem calmer," they said one evening, "less wired." She hadn't realized how much chronic training stress had bled into everything else. The irritability, the exhaustion that made small tasks feel monumental, the need to control everything because her body felt so out of control. Recovery gave her back more than strength, it gave her back bandwidth. Sometimes we only see what we've been carrying when we finally put it down. She thought about the version of herself that started this journey, the one who believed rest was lazy, who thought pain was always progress, who confused suffering with dedication. That version wasn't wrong, just incomplete. Progress isn't linear, it's cyclical, wave-like, seasonal. The body has rhythms that don't care about our calendars or our ambitions. Work with those rhythms, and training becomes sustainable. Fight them, and eventually something breaks. When she looked in the mirror now, it wasn't her reflection that had changed. It was what she believed about herself. Strength wasn't about how much she could endure. It was about how well she could listen, how wisely she could respond, how honestly she could assess what she needed moment by moment. The gym became a laboratory instead of a battlefield. Each session was data, each rest day was investment. Each choice was feedback about whether she was building something sustainable or borrowing from tomorrow. She started sharing her experience with friends who were struggling with similar patterns. Not as advice, she was careful about that, but as story. Most of them were surprised. They'd been taught the same myths she had. No pain, no gain. Push through, toughen up, prove yourself. But biology doesn't care about motivational quotes. It operates on principles that predate language itself. One friend asked, "How do you know when to push and when to back off?" She paused, considering. I pay attention to the difference between challenge and damage. Challenge feels hard but possible. Damage feels like something tearing. It sounded simple, but it had taken her years to learn the distinction. Some mornings, challenge meant showing up. Other mornings, challenge meant staying home. Both required courage. Both built strength. Researchers studying habit formation in athletes found something fascinating. The most consistent performers weren't the most disciplined. They were the most adaptive. They could shift gears without shame, scale back without identity crisis, rest without losing momentum. She was learning that flexibility now, and it felt more powerful than any PR she'd ever hit. The numbers still mattered sometimes, but they weren't the whole story anymore. They were one data point among many. How she felt waking up mattered. Whether she looked forward to training or dreaded it mattered. If she could be present with her family after a session mattered. These softer metrics didn't fit on a spreadsheet, but they determined whether she'd still be training in 10 years, 20, 50. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.